Hi, my name is Brad Emery, and I just wanted to take some time this evening to go over another artifact. We're looking at Activity A from Standard 4, Learning and Instruction. And I'm evaluating coordination and coherence among the practices, resources, and services that support equity, digital literacy, and the school's academic and non-academic systems. So the way I chose to do this for the purposes of this assignment was to look at specifically our reading as the primary area in our school, and just to consider and think about, well, what is the coherence among our reading in the school, and is our coordination and coherence across the board providing an equitable experience for all of our students? Are we making sure that all students receive the services and support they need within the bounds of our reading, to make sure that they are receiving equitable treatment and practices? So the way I did this is I took some time and attended a LETRS training, or multiple LETRS trainings, as well as ESL trainings as I was getting my ESL certification. And then I took some time and decided to compare those two and look at how much of what I've learned in those classes is being practiced in our school, and how does that lend itself to cohesion, how does that lends itself to coherence with our reading practices. So to put it in simple terms, are we practicing what we're learning to provide the best education possible for all of the students that are in our classroom, regardless of their background or where they're coming from? And the short answer is we're getting there. So, of course, no one's perfect, and our school and my own classroom is no exception. And I can be the first to admit that reading in my classroom is something that I have a lot of room to improve on, which is the primary purpose that I attended these professional developments, and I'm choosing to focus on that for this artifact. But I can also say that I am making progress towards being in a classroom and teaching in such a way that I'm comfortable saying that I am providing an equitable and coherent process for these students, to make sure that they're all going to have the same opportunities to learn. They're all going to have the same opportunities to achieve and grow and become better readers by the time they've made it through a year in my classroom. So what I found in attending these different developments that seem like they should be quite a bit different when you consider English as a second language, which is for the whole day, all subjects, compared to a very focused training on the science of reading and what it looks like to provide the best instructional practices and opportunities for students in reading. And what I found is that we have about 60 years of research on reading and how best to teach students reading. And that research is, near as we can tell, at least for English, pretty universal. As a matter of fact, it's been proven and researched and studied and proven again so many times that they consider the best way to teach reading through structured literacy a settled science. And that comes into play when we look at the English as a second language opportunities as well, because some of the features and strategies and interventions we want to make so that those English language learners are achieving and having the same opportunities aren't anything that they need pulled out for, and it's not something that's going to detract from your other students. As a matter of fact, it's just good teaching practice that's going to benefit all the students, which is one of those rare things that we look for in an equitable classroom, where instead of having to differentiate instruction, we can now start applying these practices and strategies in such a way that it not only meets the needs of our English language learners, it also is meeting needs for our students who struggle with reading disabilities or dyslexia, and it's also meeting the needs of your general ed students. And then there's opportunities to kind of push into and lean into some of these strategies to even challenge our higher level students. And it's all within one instructional strategy and range that's the best for all of the students. So this is kind of the golden goose, if we want to phrase it that way, and make sure, and because you have strategies, you have a settled science that says these are the ways in which we can teach reading so that students have the best opportunity to take what doesn't come natural to us and apply it and learn it and really make sure that they've got that knowledge moving forward so that they can be successful in life. So what are a few of these strategies? Well, one that is across the board is taking a strong stand for phonics and making sure that in younger grades students are learning and developing their phonemic awareness and that they're understanding the meaning that goes along with those sounds. So we're building meaning from reading words phonetically and learning rules and structures and systems of our language that go along with those phonics to make sure that students can learn to read and decode the words. And then as they're learning to read and decode those words, we're also providing them and filling in a background knowledge. And so we're taking and reading to them, and we're giving them rich vocabulary. We're teaching them outside of the context of them learning to read. We're also filling in these ideas of, well, what knowledge do you need to be successful in reading? What context do you need? What backgrounds and understanding do you need to be able to put what you're reading on the page into practice and for it to really click into place and be applicable to students? And that's where our strategies for English language learners really come into play also, because as we're building that background knowledge, we want to make sure that we're providing lots of visuals. We're, whenever possible, using concrete and not abstract examples. So if we're talking about something like the sport of baseball, we want to make sure that students have as many opportunities to interact and learn about that idea in a physical way. So if you can bring in artifacts and items physically to your classroom to explain the different way it works, if you can get students up and involved with it, if you can show pictures and videos, anything you can do so that students can understand and get a better grasp and a better whole knowledge of that concept is really going to help it lock into their brains, and that's going to help not only your English language learners, it's going to help your struggling readers and your gen ed students as well to make sure that that background knowledge is really solid. And then the more background knowledge you have, the more pieces that there are for other new learning to latch onto in your brain. Research has shown that that's the way that you build continued knowledge. So you have to know something in order to learn something. So the more background knowledge, the more of a foundation we can lay, the better off our students are going to be. So again, to wrap this all up, if you had told me going into an ESL training and a reading training that both would have some similarities and that I could see coherence between the two and apply both of them into a reading classroom and come out not with 20 different strategies, but with one or two best practices for teaching, I would have been amazed and probably a little disbelieving. But the great part about taking some time to look for coordination and coherence in instructional practice like this is sometimes you're pleasantly surprised and you find that in order to do the best teaching, what we really need to do is cut back and look at the best practices. So as a future administrator, I want to make sure that this is something I'm helping my teachers and my staff to look at and consider the bigger picture and just to step out of that daily grind sometimes so that we can look at what are our best practices, what is coherent throughout our instruction, how can we coordinate that instruction in such a way that we're making the most of our time and we are providing these equitable classrooms and equitable teaching practices for our students.